Nobody at Bridgepoint Veterans Medical Center wanted to fight for the locked-in Marine in room 309. The doctors called Sergeant First Class Curtis Malone a tragedy. The administrators called him a liability. The ward staff called him unresponsive, which was the clinical way of saying they had already let him go. Curtis lay in bed 309 with a military ID bracelet around his wrist and a chart on the door that read, "Minimally conscious state, progressing vegetative. Long-term placement recommended." He was 38 years old. 2nd Marine Special Battalion. And he had spent 11 years in places that did not appear on civilian maps. A buried IED on a dirt road outside Sangin had ended that. The blast had fractured his C5 vertebra, damaged the brainstem, and left him staring at a ceiling that never changed. He understood everything. Nobody at Bridgepoint knew that. Tara Wicks noticed him on her 3rd shift. She was 37, a floor nurse on the neurology ward, and she wore bright blue scrubs that looked too wide for her narrow frame. Her dark hair stayed pinned at the back of her neck in a knot that was always coming loose. She kept her eyes low around the attendings because she had learned early that quiet nurses lasted longer on wards ruled by proud men. She had learned other things before that, but those she kept locked behind a face that gave nothing away. She was pushing the morning medication cart past 309 when she stopped. Curtis Malone's right thumb was moving. Not a spasm, not a reflex arc. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Tara stood very still. Her hand rested on the cart rail. She counted again. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. SOS Morse code. Old habit of a man whose hands had once called for extraction in environments where radios failed. She pushed the cart inside. Dr. Warren Cole found her there 20 minutes later, standing beside Curtis's bed with a notepad in her hand. Cole was the chief of neurology at Bridgepoint, compact, silver-templed, and precise in a way that people confused for intelligence. He had built his reputation on outcome metrics and published research. He had a way of entering a room that made everyone in it feel they were taking up too much space. "Nurse Wicks," he said it like a correction. His right thumb is producing a repetitive pattern. Tara kept her voice flat, 3-3-3 sequence, consistent interval. Cole glanced at the monitor, motor perseveration, common in brainstem injury. It changes when someone speaks to him. Cole looked at her then. The look was specific, the one that asked, "How long have you been a nurse? Long enough to know better than this." "Document it if you want," he said. "It won't change the imaging." He left. 2 residents filed out behind him like tail fins. Tara stayed. She pulled the chair close to the bed and sat down. Curtis's eyes were open, aimed at the ceiling. She had read his chart twice. She knew about Sangin, she knew about the IED. She knew the blast had been a pressure plate trigger, command detonated, and that his team had carried him out under fire with a collapsed lung and a neck that should have killed him 3 times over. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, voice low. "I'm Tara Wicks," she said. "I'm going to be honest with you. Most people on this floor think you're not in there. I think you are, so I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to tap once for yes and twice for no. Can you do that?" The room held its breath. 1 tap. Tara exhaled slowly. She did not show it on her face. There was a tremor inside her that she recognized. The same one that lived in her hands during the quiet seconds before a mission went loud. She buried it the same way she always had. "Are you in pain?" 1 tap. "In your neck?" 1 tap, then a pause, 1 more. "Neck and somewhere else?" 1 tap. She spent the next 4 days documenting everything. Blood pressure spikes when his chin extended even 1 degree. A heart rate drop at 2 a.m. that the night staff logged as autonomic irregularity and dismissed. Pupil response that quickened when someone addressed him directly. She flagged each one in the chart. She wrote a formal nursing note requesting neurological reevaluation. Cole removed the note from active review on day 5. She found out from a ward clerk named Priya Nair, who had worked Bridgepoint's neurology floor for 9 years and had long since learned which doctors buried inconvenient observations. "He does this," Priya said. Voice dropped to almost nothing near the medication room. "When a patient has a good insurance code or when he's got a research interest, those charts get attention. When they don't fit, the notes get filed under nursing concern, non-clinical." Tara looked at the closed door of 309. "What's his research interest?" Priya's expression did the rest. That afternoon, Tara sat beside Curtis again. She had been thinking for 3 days about what she was going to do. She had watched him tap. She had watched him fail to reach anyone else. She had watched a physical therapist extend his neck during passive range of motion, while his blood pressure dropped 12 points, and nobody in the room understood what they were seeing. She leaned close. She almost said his name. Then she said something else instead. She said the word she had read buried in a single declassified line of a MARSOC mission summary, a word that had no clinical use and no administrative value, and that she had not said aloud to another living person in 6 years. Ironside. Curtis Malone's body went rigid. Not a spasm, not a seizure. The stillness of a man who had just heard his own name called across a very great distance. His eyes moved to her face. They were brown, clear, and absolutely present, and they were wet before she could draw a breath. Tara felt the floor shift under her the way floors shifted in aircraft. The sudden sensation of altitude and exposure. She had not expected to feel it here, in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and old coffee, under fluorescent lights that buzzed at a frequency that never quite resolved. She steadied herself. "I know that call sign," she said quietly. "I know where it comes from, and I think you might know mine." His thumb moved, one tap. The monitor alarmed at 8:47 the next morning. Tara was at the nursing station when the sound came. Heart rate 42, blood pressure 78/46, oxygen saturation dropping. She was moving before the second alarm cycle finished. Curtis's face had gone the color of old concrete. His chin was slightly elevated. The physical therapist's aide had repositioned him an hour earlier and left the head of the bed 2 degrees too high. It was the kind of thing that killed people slowly and got documented as disease progression. She reached for the bed controls. Cole appeared in the doorway. "Don't touch that setting," he said. His neck is extended, pressures dropping. Autonomic instability expected course. Tara looked at him. His heart rate is 42. Which is why we have comfort care orders. He doesn't need comfort care. He needs his neck repositioned. Cole's voice dropped. "Nurse Wicks, I have been exceptionally patient with your interruptions. This patient has a documented trajectory. You are not helping him by fighting what the imaging says." The monitor screamed, heart rate 37. Tara adjusted the bed. Cole's hand covered hers on the control panel, not hard, just enough to stop her. The room went cold in the specific way that rooms go cold when something has crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. Tara looked at his hand, then at his face. Inside her something went very quiet and very precise. Distance, angle, exit path, old calculation. She let it go. This was a hospital. She removed his hand from hers, with a single firm movement, and lowered the head of the bed. "Priya," she said, "call rapid response. Tell them possible autonomic crisis secondary to cervical malpositioning. Get neurosurgery on the phone." Priya was already moving. Cole stepped into her path. "You are not authorized." Heart rate 34. The respiratory tech at the door said it the way people say things they do not want to be responsible for saying. "Atropine," Tara said. "Airway cart. Suction." Cole's voice rose. "I am the attending physician." "Then act like it." The rapid response team arrived in a controlled rush. A critical care nurse named Dale took one look at the monitor and looked at Tara, and Tara gave him the summary in 7 sentences, the positioning, the bradycardia pattern, the 7 days of documented autonomic instability that Cole had filed as nursing concerns. Dale looked at Cole. Cole's face was very still. "Atropine," Dale said. "Give it." They gave it. The heart rate climbed back, 34, 41, 48, 55. Curtis's color returned in slow degrees. His eyes found Tara through the bodies crowding the room. She held his gaze. "Stay." A neurosurgery fellow named Dr. Adriana Moss arrived 11 minutes later, clipped and precise, still pulling her hair back. She reviewed the chart at the bedside. She reviewed it again. 7 days of bradycardia with positioning changes, she said. "Why is neurosurgery only seeing this now?" Cole said, "The nursing staff has been escalating non-clinical observations." Dr. Moss turned to Curtis, "Sergeant Malone. Blink once for yes, twice for no. Do you understand me?" 1 blink. "Are you in pain?" 1 blink. "Worse when your neck moves." 1 blink, then 2 rapid taps from his right thumb, an addition unprompted. Dr. Moss looked at the thumb, then at Tara. "Is that intentional communication?" "Yes," Tara said. "He's been doing it for days, 1 for yes, 2 for no." Cole said, "Motor perseveration." Dr. Moss did not look at him. "Get him to MRI." The imaging took 40 minutes. Tara stood behind the glass and watched the cervical spine appear in slices on the monitor. Old injury, cord edema, scar tissue. Then the shadow at C4, C5. Small, dense, wrong. Dr. Moss leaned forward, paused there. The tech held the image. The shadow remained. Not artifact, not calibration error. A collection, epidural, chronic, sitting against the cord like a thumb pressed against a nerve. "That's not on the original read," Dr. Moss said. Tara's voice was quiet. The original read was done on day 2 post-injury with significant edema. Nobody repeated it. Cole said, "The original diagnosis is supported by..." The original diagnosis was made while the cord was inflamed and couldn't show preserved pathways. Tara looked at Dr. Moss. He needs decompression. Moss called the attending neurosurgeon. Dr. Samuel Park arrived with silver hair and tired eyes and the specific economy of motion that good surgeons develop over decades. He reviewed the images without speaking for a long time. Then he said, "Who flagged this?" Dr. Moss nodded toward Tara. Park looked at her. "You're the floor nurse?" "Yes." "You got this from vitals and tapping?" "Yes." He studied her for a moment longer than was comfortable. Then he turned back to the images. "We take him to the OR this afternoon." Cole said, "I am objecting formally." Park said, "Noted." The consent process took 2 hours. Cole argued capacity. Tara sat beside Curtis and walked him through every question with the blink system, methodically, patient by patient. Park watched. The ethics officer watched. "Do you understand that surgery may not restore function?" 1 blink. "Do you understand that without surgery, your current condition may be permanent?" 1 blink. "Do you want Dr. Park to proceed?" 1 blink, fast, before the sentence finished. "That's consent," the ethics officer said. Cole met Tara in the hallway near the elevator bank. He lowered his voice so the residents behind him had to lean in to hear. "You have been here 14 months, he said. "In that time you have filed 9 nursing concerns, questioned 4 medication protocols, and now you've manufactured a surgical emergency from a thumb twitch and a blood pressure reading. I don't know what you're trying to prove." Tara watched the elevator doors. "I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm trying to make sure my patient doesn't get transferred to a long-term facility as a vegetative case when he can hear every word you're saying about him." "Your patient?" "Yes." "He's not your patient. He's a bed number on a trajectory." The elevator opened. Tara walked in. She pressed the button for the surgical floor. As the doors began to close, she looked at Cole. Not in anger, not in defiance, just with the specific clarity of someone who had stopped pretending to be smaller than they were. The doors closed. The OR was cold and quiet and much too clean for the kind of fear that Tara carried into it. She was not supposed to be in there. She had lost track of how many times that day she had done something she was not supposed to do. Dr. Park's team had Curtis prone under surgical draping when the monitor began to drop. Blood pressure 74/40, heart rate climbing too fast in compensation. Park said, "Venous bleeder, anatomies distorted." The circulating nurse looked uncertain. The anesthesiologist was managing the pressure alone. Tara had stripped a gown and gloves from the supply cart before she fully understood she had decided to go in. "You shouldn't be in here," Park said without looking up. "Use me quickly," she said. He paused for half a second, just the one. Then he said, "Temperature, he's cooling." "Warm him." Tara scanned the room. "Calcium ready?" The anesthesiologist said, drawing. "Warm fluids going in?" "Yes." "Blanket on the legs." The circulating nurse moved. The OR doors burst open. Cole stood at the sterile boundary with a hospital security officer and a woman from administration Tara had not met before. "Remove her," Cole said. Nobody moved. Park did not look up from the field. "If anyone interrupts this decompression before I close, I will document the interruption by name in the operative note." The security officer did not move. Cole said, "She is a suspended nurse." Park said, "She is giving useful observations, a pause, try it sometime." Priya, watching from the doorway, pressed her lips together. The bleeding slowed. The pressure responded. Park worked into the field with the patience of someone who had done this too many times to panic. Tara watched the monitor and spoke to the anesthesiologist in short sentences and kept one hand near Curtis's shoulder. Not touching, just present, the way you keep a hand near someone falling so you can catch them if you have to. She identified the lesion on the screen before Park named it. A dark collection, chronic, slow-grown, sitting against the cord like a word that had been pressed down too long. When Park suctioned it, the pressure came off, not dramatically, not in a rush of relief, just gone. The way a sound disappears when you turn off a machine you had stopped hearing. Blood pressure 96, heart rate 88. The anesthesiologist exhaled. Park said, "Cord is pulsing." Tara closed her eyes for 3 seconds. Not a miracle, a chance, the only kind worth counting. She gave the ICU handoff in exact sentences. Cole tried to interrupt twice. Park walked through him both times. At 9:14 p.m., Tara positioned Curtis's head herself, checking every strap and every line. She left the call button where the smallest movement of his right thumb could reach it. She sat in the chair beside the bed and waited. At 11:22, Curtis woke. She watched his eyes find the ceiling, then find her. "Ironside," she said. "Surgery's done. Pressure's off the cord. You made it." 1 tap. She tested sensation, working slowly, calling each location before she touched it. Most responses were absent. Then she pressed 2 fingers against the outside of his left shoulder. 1 tap. She looked at the doorway. Priya had her notepad ready. Document that, Tara said, absent yesterday. Curtis's right hand shifted. She recognized the movement before he completed it. He was trying to spell. She put the letterboard under his fingers and waited. He tapped slowly, G-R-E. Where is who? Tapping, J-O-E-L. Tara went still. She had not said that name out loud since she left the uniform. Joel Haas had been her teammate, technically her patient, technically her responsibility. A 26-year-old JTAC with a laugh that carried across a firebase and hands that shook when he was afraid, and went perfectly steady when it mattered. He had died in Helmand 6 years ago while she was 40 feet away, working to stabilize another casualty who was screaming and who she could not leave. She had believed for 6 years that she had chosen wrong. Joel's gone, she said. Her voice was flat because she was working to keep it that way. You know that. Curtis was already tapping again, slow, deliberate. HETOLDME. Tara's hand pressed flat against the bed rail. He told you what? Curtis rested, sweat at his temples, the effort of a man pushing words through 6 years of silence and 3 months of paralysis. He tapped. SFIURFAULT. The room became very quiet. Tara did not move for a long time. The monitor beeped. The IV pump cycled. Somewhere outside the ICU, a door opened and closed. She sat in the chair beside the bed of a man who had carried a dead friend's last words through 2 more deployments, and then through a blast, and then through months of silence that the hospital had mistaken for absence, and she could not speak. Curtis's right finger pressed once against her hand. She looked down at it. The sob that left her was small and controlled because some habits ran deeper than grief. She hated it for a moment. Then she let it be what it was. I left him, she said. 2 taps, hard. I was 40 feet away. 2 taps again. He was still breathing when Curtis pressed her hand with 3 fingers, the way you stop someone mid-sentence. Then he tapped, very slowly. IWAA. Tara lowered her forehead to the bed rail. She had not known. Nobody had told her. In the chaos of extraction, in the debrief that happened 2 time zones away with different personnel, nobody had told her that Curtis Malone had reached Joel before she could, had held him in the last minutes, had been the person Joel chose to leave words with. Not your fault, carried for 3 years by a man who was now blinking to stay alive. She cried in the way that people who have spent years not crying cry, quietly, briefly, and with a shame that faded as she let it go. Curtis's fingers stayed against her hand. By midnight, the hospital had begun to unravel around them. Priya had pulled the medication administration records for the past 3 months. She found discrepancies in the sedation logs. Benzodiazepines signed out against Curtis's name on nights when no order existed in the chart. Security footage from ward hallway cameras showed Cole entering room 309 at 2:19 a.m., 12 days prior, alone, with no nursing staff present and no chart entry recorded after. At 1:07 a.m., Bridgepoint's patient safety officer arrived with a VA police officer and a folder thick enough to hold everything Priya had found. Tara read the medication report twice. Then she read the contract documents the patient safety officer laid beside it. Cole had been principal investigator for a clinical trial run by Meridian Neurological Systems, a medical technology company with defense contracts and a pipeline of experimental neural rehabilitation implants. The trial required candidates with complete, documented military profile paralysis, no partial injuries, no recovery potential. A decorated Marine raider, age 38, with a compelling service record and 0 measurable function, would have unlocked an 8-figure federal grant. Curtis was worth more to Cole's career broken than he was alive. Tara folded the contracts and put them down carefully. He needed him hopeless, she said. The patient safety officer nodded. Where is he now? We're looking. Cole had not waited for them to ask. Hospital security found his office half cleared, a laptop gone, files missing. A parking garage camera on level 2 showed his car leaving at 11:58 p.m. VA police issued the hold. At 3:40 a.m., they found Cole in the parking structure of a hotel 4 blocks from the hospital. He was sitting in his car, with the engine running and the door locked, and when they tapped on the glass, he looked at them the way men look when the thing they were running toward has evaporated, and there is nothing left but what they were running from. Colonel Ben Ferris arrived at Bridgepoint at 0720 the next morning. He was Marine, 50, and he walked like someone who had never entirely left a command post. He came through the front entrance with a legal officer and a woman named Sasha Malone, Curtis's younger sister, who had driven through the night from Raleigh after receiving a call she had not let herself hope for. Ferris found Tara at the nurse's station. He looked at her blue scrubs, her ID badge, the pen in her pocket, the quality of stillness she carried. "You're Wicks," he said. "Yes." "He called you something," Ferris said. "When he came out of anesthesia, the ICU nurse documented it." Tara said nothing. Ferris held her gaze. He said piston. The ward went quiet in the specific way it goes quiet when the wrong word lands in the wrong room. Priya stopped writing. A resident looked up. Piston, her call sign, not written in any civilian file, not mentioned in any record the hospital held. Given to her after she climbed into a burning pavehawk to reach a pinned-down reconnaissance team in a valley in Kunar province where the radio had failed and the only way in was through the fire. She had buried that name when she buried Joel, put it in the ground and driven away from the uniform, and told herself that quiet was better, that small was safer, that a VA hospital floor where she could help one veteran at a time without rank or call sign or risk was a worthy way to spend whatever years she had left. Curtis Malone had reached across 6 years and 3 months of imposed silence and said it out loud. "That name stays in this building," she said. Ferris looked at her for a long moment, then he nodded once, understood. He turned to the hospital administrator standing behind him. "I want to know every decision made about Sergeant Malone's care from day one. Every consult that was declined, every note that was refiled, every imaging order that wasn't placed." He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "We will be here for a while." Sasha Malone sat beside her brother for 2 hours before he was awake enough to know she was there. When his eyes opened and found her, he did not tap or blink. He just looked at her. And she looked at him. And the two of them stayed like that for a long time in the particular language that siblings speak when words have not been available. "Hi, Curtis," Sasha said finally. Her voice was even. She was clearly working to keep it that way. "You look terrible." One tap. She laughed, the kind of laugh that lives next door to crying. "I've been waiting for that." Tara stood near the window and gave them space. When Sasha stepped out to speak with Dr. Park, Curtis turned his head, slightly carefully, the way a man turns a head that has not been turned voluntarily in months, toward Tara. She came to the bed. "You held him," she said. "It was not a question." One tap. "Did he know I was trying to get back?" One tap. Tara pressed her palm flat on the bed rail and looked out the window at the gray Washington morning. A red-tailed hawk sat on a power line across the street. She watched it until she could speak without her voice breaking. "I've been a nurse here for 14 months, she said. "I have never told anyone here what I used to be. I thought it didn't matter. I thought I was done with that part." Curtis waited. "You made it matter again," she said. "Not by being a Marine, not by having a call sign, just by being in there when everyone decided you weren't." She looked at him. "Don't do that again," she said. His right hand moved, not a tap. His fingers curled, a grip weak, barely there but closing around 2 of hers. She let him hold on. 3 weeks later, Sergeant First Class Curtis Malone stood between the parallel bars in the physical therapy gym at Bridgepoint Veterans Medical Center. His knees shook. His jaw was clenched. His sister covered her mouth from the chair by the wall. Dr. Park stood near the door with his hands in his coat pockets. Priya had her phone out to document for the chart, which was the professional reason she was crying. Tara stood at the far end of the bars in bright blue scrubs. 7 seconds, Dr. Park said. Curtis looked at Tara. She said nothing. She just stood there. He stood for 11. The investigation took 4 months. It found forged medication entries, suppressed nursing notes, falsified prognosis documentation, and $46,000 in consulting payments from Meridian Neurological Systems, deposited into an account connected to a research foundation Cole had established under a different name. It found 3 other patients in the VA regional system whose charts bore similar patterns, notes filed as non-clinical, imaging delayed, long-term placement pushed past family resistance. Cole surrendered his license in a hearing that lasted 6 minutes because there was nothing left to argue. Meridian lost its federal rehabilitation contracts. Its CEO released a statement that was 3 paragraphs of language that meant nothing. Bridgepoint changed its protocol for all catastrophic neurological injury patients. Mandatory nursing co-signature on prognosis documentation. Mandatory repeat imaging at 60 days. Mandatory communication assessment by a specialist not affiliated with the primary attending. The protocol was named after a suggestion from the neurology ward staff. They called it the Ironside Standard. Ferris called Tara 2 weeks after the protocol was adopted. He did not speak for a moment when she answered. Then he said, "Joel Haas's file, the debrief transcript, the part that wasn't included in your separation documents." A pause. "I thought you should read it." She read it that night in her car in the hospital parking structure. Joel had told the JTAC beside him, while Curtis held pressure on the wound, that the medic who had pulled 3 of his teammates out of the valley was the finest operator he had ever served beside, that he was not afraid, that nobody should be sorry. Tell Piston, the transcript read in the margin, in someone's handwriting, she'll try to carry this, she shouldn't. Tara sat in the car for a long time. Then she folded the transcript, put it in her pocket, and walked back inside. A year later, Curtis walked out of the Bridgepoint Rehabilitation Courtyard with a single cane. At the end of the path, he stopped. He held out a folded piece of paper. Tara took it. Inside was a hand-drawn patch, rough, imperfect, unmistakably intentional, a wrench, a piston, the kind of thing a man draws when his hands are still relearning how to hold a pen. Joel drew something like this, Curtis said. His voice was hoarse and slow and entirely his own. On a fob in Helmand, he said one day he'd give it to you himself. Tara held it for a moment. Then she put it in her breast pocket over her badge. Thank you, she said. Curtis leaned on the cane and looked across the courtyard where 3 veterans in wheelchairs were moving through sunlight toward the garden. One of them looked up and raised a hand. Curtis raised his. What happens now? He asked. Tara looked at the path ahead. Now we don't stop, she said. She said it the way she had learned to say things that mattered. Not loudly, not for anyone else's benefit, just clearly enough that the right person could hear. Curtis nodded once. They walked back inside.